Action! Welcome to another episode of Paul's Old Ass Movie Classics. Oh, did I say that right? I think I said it right.
Yeah, you got it. You got it.
Yeah. And today we are on episode 8. And I have my friend Drew Stewart here with me, my partner in crime.
Hello. Good evening.
And today we're going to be talking about Hang 'em High, the 1968 movie starring Clint Eastwood. And this one has a very interesting some tidbits on it, very interesting tidbits on it. First of all, you can watch this now on HBO Max. And this is directed by Ted Post, who also directed, this is afterwards, by the way, Beneath the Planet of the Apes and Magnum Force. So he would work with Clint Eastwood later in his career, or a few years later, really, not that much later. And this is written by the team of Leonard, Freeman, Mel Goldberg, who were responsible for Hawaii Five-0. I believe they're their showrunners. It doesn't say they're the showrunners, but they're the ones that kind of wrote it. And then, of course, this stars Clint Eastwood, Pat Hingle. What do you know Pat Hingle from? What would our age group know Pat Hingle from?
Commissioner Gordon.
Commissioner Gordon, yes, in the 1989
Yep.
Batman. I know I saw him. I'm like, I've seen this guy in a movie.
So familiar.
Yeah, and I'm like, and I didn't want to look it up at first, and I was just trying to think about it, and finally, I'm just like, all right, let me look, and I'm like, oh, that's right, it's Commissioner Gordon, and he looks
Well,
kind
it
of, I
all
mean,
clicked. He looked the same.
yeah. And then Inger Stevens, she plays the lead female in that. There's some other big names I wanted to give a shout out because there's some solid little roles for
It's
people.
a heavy hitting lineup.
Yeah, you have Bruce Dern, who of course is in a lot of westerns now. He was in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, among other. And then who was the other guy that was in this?
Dennis Hopper.
Dennis Hopper, that's right. Yeah, he had a real small role. And there's one other person. Oh, Louis Goss Jr. Oh no, I'm sorry, that's the next movie.
No, Ed Begley Sr.
Yeah, Ed Begley Senior's in this,
And I don't know his name, but the skipper from Gilligan's
Alan Hale Jr. Yeah, that was the big one. That was the big one.
He was amazing. Like, you can't take your eyes off that. It's a skipper.
I wanted more of him.
I know. Like, I couldn't believe. I was so bummed he was in there so little.
Yeah, and there's and if you're a big Western guy, there's a guy named Ben Johnson. He does a lot of he was in a lot of John Wayne films / John Ford films. You would know
he's the sheriff, right?
He's the marshal. Yeah, Marshal Bliss.
Bliss.
And there's another guy that's a character actor in a lot of other movies, but his name is L.Q. Jones. If you see him, he has a very distinct face, but he's also in other westerns. But yeah, this was a big movie, and Clint Eastwood. So in Clint Eastwood's career, this is like his first starring role. However, he had already shot in Europe. He had already shot the spaghetti westerns of A Fistful of Dollars, A Few Dollars More, and The Good, the Bad, the Ugly. However, they were not released yet in America, so nobody knows Clint Eastwood is not the Clint Eastwood we know yet. So that's kind of an interesting thing around here. And apparently he kind of had his lay of what movie he wanted to do. He ended up turning down Once Upon a Time in the West over this one, and that was directed by Sergio Leone. That's considered one of the greatest westerns of all time. But I kind of like his decision here because this one, not to spoiler, but I really liked this film a lot, and we'll get into the nitty gritty on this one. And IMDb rating of 7, budget 1.6, grossed $11 million. So this was a very successful film. And then the premise: when an innocent man barely survives a lynching, he returns as a lawman determined to bring the vigilantes to justice. And so, yeah, so this is kind of a hybrid American film in the style of a spaghetti Western. And for those of you that do not know what a spaghetti Western is, those are Westerns that are shot, and in Westerns, of course, are an American film genre because it takes place obviously in the American West frontier, all that good stuff. But for a time, the Italians, they would shoot it in the Italian countryside and mimic that it's an American film, dubbed and all that good stuff. And that's what they're really known for nowadays, is like the terrible dubbing. And so for me, they're kind of hard to take in. I was even started to watch A Fistful of Dollars, and compared to this film, it's just like, it's so much better. Because the weird part of with like Fistful of Dollars is there's just no background noise at all. So it's just like watching a film and then listening to people do their dubbing voices. So
Yeah.
it's really kind of annoying for me. But yeah, Drew, what's your favorite thing about this film?
I liked a lot about it. I agree with you. I like this actually a little bit more than I expected, only because I hadn't really heard of it. Like I'd heard of it, but it's
Yeah,
not one of those things that people films that you're talking about when you talk about Eastwood and Westerns typically.
yeah,
Um, I liked I very much liked the scene when I think it was after he had maybe caught the first bad guy. He'd become a marshal, and then was sent out to go looking for somebody else, not one of the posse, um, but a different criminal that the judge said, like, you work for the law now. You got to go do this.
yeah,
But I want to go look for the other guys. And so he ends up in that town, and he's going to go in and get the steak dinner at the bar or whatever.
yeah,
And he walks in and he sees, well, as he's walking by, he sees his saddle. And he's like, oh my God, one of the guys is here. He goes in, he sees Reno like drinking his face off at the bar. And then just kind of the way he enters, looking like death, just like the Grim Reaper coming, so cool looking, smoking, walks up to him, has the interaction, um, shows him the neck, puts the cigarette out in, or puts the cigarillo out in his drink, and then gives him the opportunity to give up. And the guy doesn't, shoots him like the keg behind him is like spewing beer on his like dead head, and then
yeah,
he like, crumples. And so like I just thought stylistically setting the tone for how much of a awesome, like tough guy Clint Eastwood is. All of that was cool. And then what I liked was right afterwards, because I think at that point you're wondering, like, is he just going to be kind of like a vigilante, and is he just going to kill all these guys? He did give him a chance, but he also killed him. And then he just like immediately goes into like law and order mode. He's like, okay, I need you guys to write down statements, which I would have never guessed would have happened back then. I need you guys to write down statements. I don't know how to write. You can make your mark. And just kind of, and you realize that no, in fact, he's teetering on the edge, but he's still going to be a lawman.
yeah. Uh, yeah, I really like a lot of this film and really glad we saw this. Like we had mentioned preemptively on this film, my I've seen a lot of maybe the older westerns, but there's still a lot of Clint Eastwood because Clint Eastwood, besides John Wayne, is known as the American movie cowboy, um, especially in this era. And so, admittedly, my knowledge of his films aren't uh, as good on some of them. And so there's just a lot of his library I really wanted to see. And so this was one of them. And this is quickly moved up. Like I definitely want to see this again at some point. But I have seen A Good, Bad, the Ugly. I've seen, like I said, I've seen A Fistful of Dollars, and I like this more than that, mainly because again, I think this is a nice hybrid of the what makes the spaghetti westerns good, but at the same time has the good audio, and it's still a very good American western that has the nuances of actual filmmaking. Because Sergio Leone is very talented, but again, I feel like his hands are tied behind him back with the dubbing stuff. You know what I mean? And but like Once Upon a Time in the West is so amazing. It's the cinematography and even the sound design is so excellent in that film. And so um I really, really like this film and a lot of those elements to it. My favorite part of this film was definitely seeing just some of these well-known faces in roles that they really do well. Like again, Commissioner Gordon, I probably should just call his regular name, but Commissioner Gordon was excellent in this film, and I really liked him in this. Bruce Dern, I mean, the guy looked familiar at first, and I'm just like, I'm wondering which one's Bruce Dern, and then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, that's Bruce Dern. Okay,
He's so young. I'm so used
yeah,
to seeing an older Bruce Dern.
yeah, 100%. And and he was awesome in this. And then again, like I said, like we were talking about earlier, Alan Hale. I wanted more Alan Hale. It was disappointing that really after the first scene, I don't recall seeing him again.
He
And
showed up at that right before the scene I was talking about, and he was blacksmithing, and he's riding through the town, and he just sees him. And he's like, "Come
okay,
with me, you're under arrest." But he didn't even really talk.
yeah, yeah, yeah. So but yeah, I love just seeing a lot of these actors again that we grew up with in this. And again, I just think this is a really good complete Western, really good story, really good setup, and kind of adds that classic Clint Eastwood with the traditional Western. So that's one of the things I like about the film. Does this movie hold up, Drew?
Yes. I feel like I've equivocated a little bit. I mean, there's always going to be elements in an older film, and maybe it's the time in which the film was made, and probably more likely it's the time in which the film is talking about. Like, I feel like there's some elements that are a little bit cringy. Like,
Yeah, that's
he's
the
like
70s
he's
filmmaking.
like
Like,
kissing her when she's like not into it at all, and she's like,
yeah,
my
the rape
husband died
kissing.
and was raped, and he kisses her again, and he, like, that part was like so uncomfortable.
Yeah, like leave me alone. No,
No,
Gonna keep
like,
giving.
I'm gonna die in between. Like, the rain's gonna come and I'm gonna die. We're gonna go in this shack, and then I'm gonna try to kiss you again after you just told me this horrible
Yeah,
story.
that scene was.
That scene was
We
such a
could have
weird
done just fine without that scene.
contrived. Like, you could have just left their romance as like
Yeah,
simmering and never getting there. Like, whatever. That was
but to
weird.
me,
But
that's like classic Clint Eastwood because in a lot of his movies, one, he always apparently hooks up with all of his actresses.
yeah,
And so this is one of them, by the way. He had an affair with her. And so it just to me, it's always that's always just part of it. It's like, by the way, it's not necessarily fit the story. It's totally
yeah.
not. It's a non sequitur to the film, but
He's got to get his
I'm
rocks
gonna
off.
really try and make out with you, and we're gonna have an affair on the set. So
Yeah. Anyway, that part was just like a little bit awkward, but yes, it holds up. And part of the reason why for me, and I feel like I kind of go to this all the time in terms of like why to me it would still hold up. But like the themes in here are so interesting. Yes, it is in some ways a straightforward Western. Some ways it is just a story about like revenge. But it's a lot more than that. It's like you're seeing kind of an interior struggle over what is the meaning of law and order? What is the meaning of the rule of law?
oh yeah, 100%.
What is the meaning of vengeance, and how far can you push it? And
Capital punishment, even to an
I
extent.
was just gonna say 100%, like the death penalty, capital punishment. You see that interior struggle with him. You see the judge. The judge is so strange. Like, they hang everybody. Like, I
Yeah.
think like it's like, oh, you murdered somebody, you're hung. Oh, you stole a licorice pipe from the dime store.
Yeah, what
You're
at
going
one
to the
point
gallows.
the guy was like, well, they're stealing cattle, so we got to let them know. We got to hang them all. It's like, geez,
So, and maybe
I don't
that
know if
was
the punishment quite fits the crime.
maybe that was accurate. I don't know. Maybe they just hung everybody. But so, I mean, it was, but the judge, even though he was hanging everybody, he's standing at the window and he's really struggling watching it when it happens. And
Yeah,
so I think the sort of morality and ethical questions that were woven throughout, I
yeah,
think were apropos then or apropos now. We still debate the death penalty. We just had a strange and different death penalty in Alabama or somewhere, I think a week or
yeah,
two ago, where they used a new method. So a lot of these things are timeless. The struggle, like, what is law enforcement? How far can they push it?
yeah,
And the ethical dilemma goes. So I think it holds up, and I think stylistically for me, because I agree with you, like, this was definitely a newer Western, even though it's dated compared to today. This
yeah,
wasn't a John Wayne Western. Like, the sets, like, everything was done really well. I thought, for the most part.
yeah. I mean, you
To
can
me,
tell
it
the
holds up.
difference. You can tell the difference between the direction of like a John Ford versus Ted Post. I mean, this guy came from TV, and the reason why Clint Eastwood wanted to work with him, this is the first Malposo film, Clint Eastwood's production companies. This was their first film that they produced. But the reason why he chose Ted Post was because he was very good at dialogue, and obviously he did Rawhide stuff like
Yeah,
that. So he's got the TV background, but they wanted to really work with the dialogue, and so you can kind of tell that the dialogue in this film, I think, like you're saying, was more poignant than a Western. This is kind of like The Searchers in a way where you're really dealing with, like you're saying, these social issues, but it's not throwing up one way or the other. It's really giving you a balanced argument on both.
yeah,
And you can make both sides, I think, made good arguments on, what is what. And so yeah, I think all that stuff really holds up. Um Yeah, I think you nailed it. I don't really have much more to add besides this movie hold up. There's a couple things though I want to point out. One, the title, the font, I loved right away. I loved how the titles came in, and I'm like, oh yeah, this is awesome. And then the music, that's what really stood out to me right away too, is like I'm on an adventure. Like I loved how they combined all these elements of filmmaking. Again, there's a lot of different ways that filmmakers choose to do things, but I loved what they did with this one with the titles and the music. The music was
It,
super prevalent.
the first 5 minutes is an emotional roller coaster. I
Yeah.
mean, it's just this idyllic music in the Old West, and he's like picking up baby cows out of the river and
Yeah.
dusting them off and picking, and then the next thing you know, the lynch mob is coming for him.
Yeah. Yeah. And then, and then he's very calm and like, can you show us the bill of sale? And he has, and he seems calm. But then all of a sudden it's like, yeah, the guy is 6 years old. And it's like, whoa, okay. Like, so either he's a really good liar, like what's happening? So yeah, right. You're in this movie right away, which again, that's great storytelling because I don't need it drug out right away. Again, you're adding all the elements to make this movie exciting right away. That's why I really like this movie. This is a hard one. Contemporary comparison. I think I have mine, but I'm curious what you got.
This was hard. I'm gonna go in part because of exactly what you just said with this. When the title came in, the first 5 minutes and sort of how they did the scrolling the cast, doing the title the way it came in, about the 5 minute mark or whatever, and then the font, like it was a very. I see so many elements of Tarantino
Oh, of course. I mean, he was
in
highly
in
inspired by this film.
1,000%. And
Yeah.
so it's impossible to not. When this script came through, I was like, "Oh my, is this a Quentin Tarantino film?"
Yeah.
Um, and so for me, I couldn't not think Tarantino when I was doing it. I was like, maybe a Hateful Eight. For me, I actually ended up with Django. Um,
Okay.
and so they're going for a bounty, similar to he's going out trying to hunt people down. Not the same film, and Django is.
No, there's not a straight up.
No, but to me, for me, I kept going back to and thinking about Django Unchained.
Yeah, I went with and I want to be very clear. I don't think this movie holds up to this movie that I'm about to say, but a lot of elements reminded me of Tombstone, where you have again this really great score. You have this good man that goes on kind of the like his vengeance. And so that does just kind of remind me with Kurt Russell and Tombstone. Again, not a apples to apples comparison at all. There's just a lot of differences in this film. And again, the 70s style, of this film also just throws out a lot of films because it's just like there's some hardcore 70s zooms and stuff like that that really take you out of the moment. But
And it keeps your 1990s contemporary alive. Tombstone is one of my top 10 favorite movies. I love that movie.
oh yeah, I think it's the greatest Western of all time. Like
It's so good.
complete. My favorite, like more like best in my heart is Young Guns 2, but Tombstone I think is the best made Western.
Top to bottom,
Yeah.
actors acting,
Everything, yeah. I
Val
think
Kilmer in that movie.
yeah. Like we're gonna do that for our other podcast, so stay tuned for that one. Yeah, good. And then should this be remade today and who would it star?
I think so. Yes, I think for all the reasons we just talked about, like
Yeah.
I feel like you could almost just remake it as a similar Western and it would be entertaining. But I think you could update it a little bit, but with similar themes.
Without
To
the rape,
me,
the date rape scenes.
that part was hard. That part was tough. But certainly that still happens. Um,
And try and get the age right. So he's in his I think he's like 40-ish in this one.
yeah. Um, so for ages, I'm gonna go, and I think I have two good ones because I'm gonna just choose Clint and I'm gonna choose the judge because they're kind of the two main characters.
Okay.
I'm going Idris Elba
Oh,
for
interesting.
Clint Eastwood's character,
Yeah.
for Jed's character, because he plays a I think he can play a very tormented
Yeah, for
guy,
sure.
but also he's a tough guy. So for me, Idris Elba, and then I'm gonna go Brian Cox for the judge. I think he would
Oh
do a
yeah.
good job as the judge.
Yeah, Brian Cox would be good. Um, Yeah, I really couldn't think of any, to be honest. I've been racking my brain trying to figure out who would I mean, I feel like you can do kind of pretty much any A-lister, like a Christian Bale, I think would work because
I
he
thought
did.
of Christian Bale too. He's great in Western. I mean, he's great in everything. He's great in Western.
Yeah, he's done a couple Westerns and I think he's really good in it. So that would probably be my number one choice. Um, and then for the judge, I guess Clint Eastwood would be too old now because I think that'd be cool
That would
if
be cool.
he was the judge, but I think he's a little too old. Um,
Scott Eastwood.
yeah, but even I'd have to check his age, but like even Morgan Freeman, I really want somebody like a Robert Duvall, you know what I mean? But I feel like my age group is too old. Like I'm trying to think who's
This
in the
guy's more like in his like late 40s, 50s.
yeah, I'm trying to
They're
think.
all in their like it's close to 80 now or more.
I mean, Kurt Russell. I think Kurt Russell would be really good for that judge. There's also a guy. If I went with a lesser known actor, um, I've met him before actually. He's in like
No big deal.
Transformers. He always plays a general, Glenn Morshower. Um, but he's like I said, he plays a lot of like military roles. And so I think he kind of fits that role. You know, also I can think could work.
1000% he was one of the three I was thinking was that guy. And I didn't even
Okay.
know. He always plays a general.
Always plays like a general. I think would be great. Another guy would be Gerard Butler. I think could also pull this role off too.
For
Uh,
the judge or for Clint Eastwood?
Clint Eastwood's role, yeah.
Okay.
I would like to see Gerard Butler actually in some westerns because he really hasn't done it, and I feel like I mean, he does a lot of tough films, so I don't
He
feel
would be
like
good.
it's below him or
Yeah,
anything.
he
So
can play very gritty.
yeah, awesome. All right, so our list today is going to be top five Clint Eastwood films, of course. You know, we don't mess around, and yeah, we'll do 5-1. We'll start with you, Drew. What do you got?
I'm gonna go number five because it is a
Wait, well, let me before you start, let me
yeah,
ask you a question. How easy or difficult was this list for you?
very hard. It was hard for me. Like I had to leave out some films I really like.
Okay.
Was
I
it easy for you?
It was actually really easy, but not because he doesn't have a great body of work, but it's just like I felt like I already knew my favorites like pretty easily.
Okay.
And so like
Because
when I did it, it just kind of confirmed it like, oh yeah, this.
like I left off the spaghetti westerns. Like I was gonna put the good, bad, and the
Oh
ugly.
yeah, they don't make mine.
I was gonna put the good, bad, and the ugly because it's I actually like it maybe a little more than you, but also for just sort of like
I like it.
what it meant to cinema, like what it meant to catapulting him into like who he became.
Yeah.
So my first one is I feel like this one is just it's such a American story. It's a classic Escape from Alcatraz.
Yeah, nice. I have the same one actually for number five.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like I kept trying to leave it off and I couldn't leave it off.
I was debating on putting it as high as three.
Yeah. It could have
But
been
I love that film. It's actually another film I want to watch again. I've only seen it like the one time, but he was perfect role for him. He was excellent.
nice. Yeah.
That movie was great. Next, I have number four. I have this film, Hang 'em High. For all the reasons we said, I think there's a couple other films he's did like Pale Rider or Outlaw Josie Wales. I can maybe throw in. So to me, this is his 70s because this is 68, so I'll just include, but his American Westerns you can almost throw any of those in there and I'm good with it. But I obviously it's fresh, but I really liked him in this one. Because again, like just more of the film overall versus necessarily his performance. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
I really enjoyed this one. I really enjoyed this one. So I got this number four.
Good. Yeah, I mean it's hard for me to leave off because I did like it a lot. I for four, I'm gonna go a movie I don't know that many people have seen. I only came across it recently, and maybe it's because it's so recent that I like it, but the Iger Sanction.
I don't think I've
Uh,
ever.
it's a 70s film. He plays kind of an assassin that's trying to get out of the game, and they bring him back in, and he has to go to Europe. He starts in America. He has to train. He's like a He's going to do like a rock climbing caper. So it's kind of like almost like a to me kind of like a Western meets James Bond.
Really?
But as I kind of said about Marathon Men back when we did that, like you give me a 70s espionage government like
Iger
conspiracy
Iger Sanction.
Iger sanction. Um, You give me all of those elements, and I'm just in it all the time. So that movie is number 4 for me.
Nice.
Probably most people haven't seen it. I highly recommend it.
I'm gonna look. I'm looking at it right now to see if I can find it.
Yeah. So that was 4, and then I'll do my 3. I've got Dirty Harry.
Nice.
Dirty Harry, couldn't leave it off. It's iconic. It's important in a way that it's like not, it's not necessarily the greatest film of all time, but
No.
sort of that
But I
grit.
love his character in that. I have
His
my
character is amazing. It changes fundamentally how we like a cop in cop movies and TVs. Um, so for
oh,
me,
it's on Stars. So the Iger sanction one. That's
Tiger
on Stars.
Sanction.
Yeah,
That's
I'll check that one out.
yeah.
I have the same Dirty Harry. For every reason you just said, I think, this is like that's the epitome of Clint Eastwood, like what we know him of.
Yeah.
More so, a lot
If he's not a cowboy, he's Dirty Harry.
yeah. And so a lot of people confuse his lines with, like he says them in a Western, but he doesn't actually have that many classic Western lines. Versus a lot of his Western lines are, a lot of his famous lines are from Dirty Harry.
Yeah.
Uh, so yeah, that's my number three. And then my number two is probably my favorite film of his, but not his best film. So my favorite film of his, which is my number two, is going to be In the Line of Fire. It's probably the film I like
Oh,
the most from him.
I didn't put it on my list, and I love that movie. That was the
Uh,
hardest one to leave off.
I can watch that movie
It's so good.
10 times a day. I've seen it so many times. John Malkovich is in so awesome. That's one of my favorite films.
It's a great movie. It killed me to leave it off, and only because to me it wasn't like as significant as some of his other films, but it's one of
Oh,
my favorite.
I didn't care. I've seen that movie at least 100 times probably.
It's so good.
Yeah. I watched it not that long ago again. Like I said, it's such a movie I can throw on and I can just be enthralled with it. So,
Yeah.
all right, what do you got?
That was your 2.
That was my two. Yeah.
So I'm at 2. I'm going to do 2 and 1. So
Yeah.
I've got this was hard for me to decide between 2 and 1. Unforgiven is my number 2. Amazing Western, more modern Western. Morgan Freeman. I love that we're now moving into an era where you can have a black character that actually is important,
Yeah.
uh, not just kind of uh, almost like an extra or a victim of some kind.
Yeah.
Uh, Freeman's character was great. And Gene Hackman can do no wrong ever for
You
me.
know what's crazy? Because I was looking at that movie the other day and where I was trying to figure out where that was like in Morgan Freeman's career because now it's like, oh, it's Morgan Freeman,
Yeah,
one of his actors.
it's pretty early.
Is 100% early. He
Yeah,
really had only done
he had done like Driving Miss Daisy, probably.
Driving Miss Daisy, but a lot of people, I mean, I would say
Yeah,
that's not the most popular film, but he did, Lean on Me, which that's probably the first film I recognized him in.
yeah,
So, he's a known actor, but at the same time, it's not,
and like Glory, but a smaller part.
oh, Glory, that's right. Glory was the first one.
Yeah,
Glory was the first one, but that was a real supporting actor role. Then I think it was
Driving Miss
I
Daisy.
Miss Daisy. And then it was Lean on Me. But Lean
Yeah,
on Me was his real first. This is my movie, and this movie. So he had that's a great stack of movies, by the way.
for sure.
But he's still again pretty new in our minds, and so
Yeah,
yeah, it's crazy. But now you're just like, oh yeah, Morgan Freeman, Clint Eastwood, like you got to check this out. But
let's
it's
go.
at the time he probably wasn't as like considered it like as big as he
Yeah,
is now.
it was a riskier pick. Like he wasn't, and quite frankly, there also just wasn't as many famous mainstream black actors back then.
Yeah, for sure.
But he was amazing. Um, my number 1 is more recent. Like I said, I could have gone back and forth. And he's done actually. I've really enjoyed several of his very recent films where he's in his late 80s and 90s and directing. But I have Gran Torino. Um, I shout out Detroit. It's in the city that is important to my family. Um, to what so much of America meant, and then to watch its decay, to watch this guy that is a veteran and was part of that city and when it was at its peak, and to watch him watch its decay after having lost his wife, dealing with his biases and race, and then it like this could have been like maybe even better as like a mini series or a limited series where you can watch his character develop a little bit more over time. It switched
Yeah.
on, it kind of switched on a dime, but it's a great film. He is hilarious. The relationship with the neighbor is amazing.
Awesome. Yeah.
It's
It's
an
a great film.
incredible like story of like kind of like redemption and vindication, and really well done.
Yeah.
I love Gran Torino.
Yeah, that was gonna be my number five. And I agree with everything you're saying. I think it's an excellent film. But I wanted to include Escape from Alcatraz because, like, again, some of
Yeah,
these films are just iconic, and so it's like I got to include those too.
like I said, I had a hard time. He's got a lot of movies I really like.
Yeah. The Gran Torino is the one though I really wanted to include. That was like the hardest one. That actually, I think it's really the only one I left off. The rest of them I was good with leaving off.
Yeah,
Gran Torino was the one because I like you're saying, it was just a really really good story. But yeah, my number one was your number two, Unforgiven. I think I think it's the best written Western when you're talking about true character like development and
yeah,
arc and all that stuff. I think Unforgiven, that's maybe the best written Western of all time. Um,
it's great.
and so yeah, I love that film. I watched that quite a bit. Um, and yeah, he's amazing in that one. But it's I think that movie adds so much gravitas to it because of his age in that film, and so it just he really is like you know what this guy used to do. Like you don't even have to like imagine him doing it
Yeah,
because you're like, oh, I know that guy. He was in all those other westerns. You know what I mean? So it's like this natural. I wish John Wayne kind of had a role like that. He really didn't. I mean, maybe a Rooster Cogburn,
yeah,
but Rooster Cogburn wasn't as tightly written as Unforgiven. But
yeah.
yeah, awesome. Well, it was a great list. Great list. We're pretty.
That was the most similar I think we've been.
Yeah, for sure. I think we had, yeah, the only difference was I had In the Line of Fire and you did Gran Torino, which sure.
And
I mean,
I did Iger Sanction, so I missed one other one of yours.
oh, Hang 'em High. You didn't include Hang 'em High.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
But you didn't put really any of his older Westerns then.
It was hard for me to keep Good, Bad, and the Ugly off, but I put Unforgiven on instead for
Yeah.
Western.
Yeah. Awesome. All right. Well, that's gonna wrap it up for this episode. We got a good one for next week. It's called A Raisin in the Sun. It's 1961. This is Sidney Poitier stars in this one, and you can find this one on Tubi. And there's another subscription service that it's on, and you can also find this on TCM, which I don't think it's a paying subscription. I think, or it's on HBO Max. Like somebody has TCM's library. I believe it's HBO Max. So
Okay.
you can find it on one of the other. I know Tubi you can watch it, just be with ads. So either way, you will be able to watch this one. So TCM or Tubi, both of those are, I believe, free. So Raising the Sun, that's the one we're gonna watch. It's got an 8 on IMDb, so pretty high ranking. So
Yeah.
we're excited about that.
Love Sidney
And
Poitier, so should be good.
yeah, he's a beast. This will be my fourth film I've seen of him, so I want to see obviously more of him because he's one of the greatest actors. So, well, thanks, Drew, for joining us. Make sure you guys like, share, subscribe. If there is a movie, guys, that you think we should watch in this podcast, please comment below. We'd love to hear you, and then put what streaming service is on. Because remember, we don't just want to watch old films. We want to make sure people have access to it on a major streaming service. I don't want people to have to go out and buy those. That's not the point of this. This is supposed to be kind of like we're at a public library and you can grab this book there. So please comment below any movies that you guys have for us. We would appreciate suggestions as well. The next film, if you guys want to like a little where are my heads at, I would love something go back into like the 1930s, 1940s, something that's got an award-winning film from those areas. So that's where I'm going to do my research. So if you guys have something, oh, we should check out that. That's what we want to do. So thanks so much. And with that, Drew, that is a cut. Thanks, guys.